If you want to learn the fundamentals of Framer and build beautiful websites without writing any code, you have come to the right video. My name's Matt Jumper, and I'm going to walk you through how to take this site that was designed in Figma and bring it to life inside of Framer. And we're going to do this all under 30 minutes. Now, I'm only going to make the first hero section inside of Framer, but you're welcome to take the Figma file and keep going and put your skills to the test. You can grab the Figma file and a Framer remix in the notes below. So let's dive in. All right, so we have our design in Figma, and I have my colors and my type styles ready to go, and I'm going to do this as the first step. So I'm actually going to use the Figma to Framer plugin, and I'm just going to copy these elements. And this is a great tool to actually bring your designs into Framer. I'm not going to use this to actually design anything. I'm just going to use this to bring in the styles because I want to show you how to actually use Framer properly from scratch. But to start, I'm just going to paste in these values here just so I can easily make these styles. So I'm going to click on all the colors here, and on the right, we get all of our properties. So we have a fill here. I'm going to make a new style for all of these colors. And you'll also notice that we have a light mode and a dark mode theme. So if we wanted to, we could actually change these colors based off of your website's theme, which is pretty cool. But we have our color styles here, and I'm going to do the same thing for the text styles. So it actually brought in the exact same properties as in Figma. It says this font is missing, although it does exist inside of Framer. But I'm just going to go to the styles here and also just hit new style. And for the first one, it's a heading, so we'll make sure that's an H1. But for the rest, these are all going to be paragraphs. Okay, so now that we have these styles, if we go to the left panel here, we have pages, we have layers, and we have assets. And under the assets, you'll see we have all of our styles we just created. And if we want to, we can go and edit these in the future. I'm actually going to set these colors by default to be black, and we can always change what they are on the canvas, but it's just good to use all of the color styles together. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete these layers here. Next, I'm going to take the copy, and I'm just going to bring it onto Figma. So I'm going to tap T to bring up the text box, Command V to paste it, Command D to duplicate it, and just do that for all the content. And I'm also going to grab the images for the hero. Okay. All right, so we have all the assets in here. And the text here, I can actually just quickly apply these styles. And you'll notice that I can click anywhere and just drag them wherever I want them to be. And the reason for this is because the desktop container right now is actually a frame and not a stack. So to put this simply, a frame is a div or a container, and there's no auto layout applied if you're coming from Figma or Flexbox applied if you're coming from CSS. It's basically just a standard div, and everything is positioned absolute. So that means it's anchored to a position from the top or from the left or from the right, from the bottom. You can change these anchor points, and it'll kind of respond differently based off of this. So this is anchored to the right, this is anchored to the left and the top. If I drag out my browser, you'll see that's where it hangs on to. So there's a time and place for frames and absolute positioning, but for the most part, especially on the top level container, I want to make sure that this is actually using a layout so the content flows from the top all the way down. So I'm going to go to the right here and turn this desktop frame into a desktop stack. And right away, you'll see that all the content just snapped into place, and now it has order. So now the content is starting from the start of the page at the top, or of the container. And the alignment set to center, but we can change it to the left, we can change it to the right. We can change the gap, so like the spacing between all these elements. And we can adjust the padding as well. So if we set this to 80, we're creating this space around this whole container. Set that back to 0, and the gap will set to 0 as well. So on the desktop container, I typically like to set the gap and the padding to 0 and just set all that stuff inside of each container. And that just gives me more customization and control for each section. So let's take this text here, and looking at the designs, I want to make sure that this text is all in one container, and the text for the buttons is actually side by side. Right now, this container is just all up and down. So let's start with the buttons, and we can select them both. I'm going to hit Shift A and just turn them into a stack here. And the direction here, I'm going to change this to left and right. And again, you'll see that we have its own container in the layers panel. So now they're beside each other. And I can also put the text and the buttons, these three layers here in their own stack as well. And now they have their own container with their own rules in it. So the gap, the spacing, I can set this to 16. And again, it's not going to affect the spacing of the rest of the site. And we have the alignment here to the left. So let's change this to align left. And you'll notice that we have the stack here that didn't change because basically this has its own properties. And because it has a different direction, we're actually going to change the distribute to start instead of the align to left because it's left and right, not up and down. Okay, so we have our container here, and this thumbnail image, we actually want to be on the right of this as well. So we'll take this thumbnail layer, and if I just drag it inside of here, it just goes underneath because this direction is up and down. So what we need to do is take these layers here and put them in their own stack and go up and down and 16, basically just recreating that stack we just made. Change the alignment and then changing this stack here to left and right. So now it's sitting beside it. The sizing here is obviously very large. So we can go here and check it's 160. And the aspect ratio here is locked. So I can just set this to 160 and that'll be the right size. So I'm going to add the 64 pixels of padding to this layer or to this stack here. And when I preview this, we have the 64 pixels. But when I drag it out, it actually fills the whole width, which I want to set a max width so it doesn't get wider than, say, 1312 pixels. So I can click on this stack here, and it has the padding applied to it. I could add the max width here, but then it's going to be a max width that includes the padding inside. So if that's, say, 1312 minus 64 minus 64, that's actually a max width of 1184, which I don't want. I want the max width to be unburdened by the padding. So I'm going to remove the padding on this level and add the max width here. And we'll use a fixed number here. And then we'll put this in its own stack. So we can right click and hit add stack. Careful with the shortcuts because Shift A sometimes turns elements into fit. Other times it turns it into a stack. So just be careful with that shortcut. Command Option Return always turns it into a stack, but that just requires two hands, which is tedious sometimes. So as I was saying, we have our stack on the outside here, and I can put the 64 padding. I remove the gap, and now it doesn't get wider than 1312, and then here we'll always get that 64 pixels of margin on the outside or padding. So I'm just going to rename these just for context here to hero and then to max width. So we know that this is where the max width is applied, and then the content. And clicking on the content, I can see that actually the alignment here is to the top. So I'm going to click on this max width container, change the alignment to the middle. And this is feeling better. So this image, now we want to get behind this content. So one easy way that we can do it is actually just click on this layer here, and I'm going to copy the fill, and we can just delete it and go to the hero, go to the fill, and hit paste. So now it's behind it, but again, this container is only fitting the height of the content. So we can change this. We can set it to a fixed size if we want to, so it's always going to be, say, like 1,000 pixels if that's what you want to do. But I'd rather make this a viewport height, where it's going to be 100% of the user's viewport, regardless of what size your screen is. So I can preview basically different viewport sizes, but this doesn't change how it actually displays. When you preview it, you'll see this is taking up 100%. So from here, the alignment on this container, I'm actually going to set to the bottom, and we still have that 64 padding. So now this is behaving how we want it to. And since we have this image behind here, I'm going to go to this text here and set it to white. And we'll have to tweak these buttons, of course, but just make sure everything's visible. And this now brings us to components. So there's many different use cases for components. The first one and the most common one is reusable elements. So a button definitely makes sense to be a component because you're going to use it in more than one spot. So I'm going to right click on this text, hit create component. We'll call it button. So now we have a dedicated screen just for this button here. And this is where we can make customizations to this button. So let's start just by styling it. I'm going to set a background here of white, I'm going to change the text to black. And I'm going to change the radius of the container here to 80 to make it that pill shape. And I'm going to change the width here. Instead of having a fixed width and having to decide how wide this should be, that text is going to change, so we don't want to risk inconsistencies. So we can just set the width here to fit content, and we can isolate the sides here and just add some padding to the outsides and grab this from Figma. So this is 40 pixels on the outside. And I like to use fixed heights for buttons, so we can set that to 48. And now we have a button shape here. So this looks good as a button. And now I'm going to make a variant of this, meaning basically second version. So we can choose this on the canvas, which one we want to use. So we have our primary button here. And then we have a secondary one where there's no fill and there's just an outline. So we can make these changes. And you'll see that this is changing on the variant 2, but it's not changing in variant 1. Any changes you make not in the primary variant don't get updated elsewhere. But if I make a change on the primary variant, let's say the text here, I set it to red, it'll update across everywhere. But since this background here has been removed here on the second variant, you'll see that there's purple here to indicate that it has an override on it. If I change this to say, you know what, I want a blue button, it's not going to update on the other variants because there's overrides already. So I'm just going to undo that. And let's just set this text here to white. We can rename these primary and secondary. So now back on the canvas, we have this button component. You can see the icon here. The widths and the heights didn't get updated here, so I'm going to set these back to fit. And I can set the height to fit as well because it's just going to inherit the height inside the component. I'm going to delete this text here and just duplicate this component. And on the button component here on the right, we can actually change the variant to secondary. So now we have these two styles. We obviously don't want this text to say pre-order in both cases. So we're going to go in the component. We're going to add a variable for the label. So if I click on the text, I can set the content in here. But if I want to make this a variable, meaning allow myself to change it on the canvas or kind of set it based on different conditions, I can do that by going to create variable, plain text, and we can call this label and set the default to label as well, just to make sure that we don't have any accidental text that kind of carries over. So now this label is going to get fed up to the canvas, and we can now change the label here to pre-order and to compare models. If I click back in here, it would be good to set the actual links. So on the right here, we can do link, and I could just select a page or put in a URL, but that would affect all the buttons. So I want to make a variable here, create variable, and now all the buttons are going to have this variable attached to it. And if I click on this, I can actually manage all the variables I have set up. So going back to the home page, now I have a control here for the link. So for now, I can just set these both to home, but this is going to be a unique link per button. Going back into the button, now we can add hover states. So on the primary button, if I click on this, I can just add a hover here. Secondary, I can add hover. And these are independent of each other, so basically I can do them both separately. So let's just change the fill here. On hover, it's just going to go to gray. And then on this one, we can change the fill to white and this to black. Not putting too much effort into these hover states. But now we get the hovers. And then another great use case for components is just getting more control for interactions or hover states. So this thumbnail isn't going to be reused across a different section or a different page, but we can still benefit from it being a component. So I'm going to put this inside of another frame here just so I can keep that image as its own layer. And let's just create this component now. We'll call it thumbnail. And you'll see now we still have this image inside here. And these are frames. We're not using a layout or any relative positioning. It's still absolute. So we'll start with the sizing here. I want to make sure that this is actually a 16:9 ratio. So we'll just copy the sizing of 284 to 160. and we'll lock that now. And then inside of here, this thumbnail, we can unlock this ratio, and we'll just make this 100% of the container. And we'll just align it to be exactly in the center. So now this allows us to go to the top container and set a black background. And then now on this image here, we can actually reduce the opacity to, what do we have here? Around 70%. And that darkens it up. We also had a radius, say of 16 pixels or 8 pixels. And then we had a border of white at 8%, a width of 2. And we also had a play button. So instead of making a custom play button, which is very simple, let's just drop in an icon from, say, Phosphor Icon or any of those libraries. And on the properties panel, we can just search for play, set the weight to fill, set the color to white, and the sizing here, we can JIT it to 40 by 40. And again, just center it to be inside of this in the middle. And this icon landed inside of this frame here for the image. So let's just take this out and put it on top. So now this is what we had in Figma. And now we can just add a hover state. And we can change whatever we want here. So we can scale this up. We could add a transform scale. And now we can make it larger in the hover state. We could make the image in the background also go larger if we wanted to, or brighter or darker. We'll go darker maybe and bigger. So let's just see what this does now. Okay. On the canvas here, this sizing is overridden. So I just want to set this to fit and fill. So that aspect ratio is going to stay the same. And the size of this is going to be dictated by the height of this container. I'm just going to go in here and tweak this a bit. Okay. And then while I'm here, I'm actually going to make an appear animation, because that's one of Framer's strong suits, is just like all the effects and animations. So I'm going to add an effect appear on this thumbnail layer, so it's just the image. So on appear, it's fine, basically when it loads. Presets fade in fine. I'm going to customize this. So the opacity is going to start at 0. The scale is going to be at, say, 1.5, so it's going to start big and then get smaller. So I'm just going to change this. Instead of time-based, I'm going to make it physics-based and just kind of play with this a bit. Just be smoother entrance. And let's go back, test this out. See, there's a bit of flickering here. I'm just going to remove the appear effect on the hover state. All right, and then now for the navigation. So I'm going to basically just do the same thing I did for the hero and the max width, where we have the padding on the outside and the max width inside of that stack. So I'm going to make a new stack. I'm going to tap S and just drag this here, bring it out to the top, and I'm going to delete the frames inside. And we can set this width here to fill. We'll set the height to 72, and we'll name this navigation. This is the outside stack here, so I'll remove the gap. We'll set the padding here on the left and right to 64. And then let's make a new stack inside. Again, we can just tap S, delete these frames here. And this is going to be the max width. So we can set the width to fill. We can set the height to fill as well, because the height is being set on the parent container. I'll remove the gap for now. We'll come back to it. And we'll add a max width here of 1312. So if we just add colors here, just to make sure this is working, and preview this, it's following that same layout. Okay, so inside of here, this is our max width. let's go ahead and copy these elements as we did before. Tap T, just paste these in. Okay, so we want to separate the logo from these elements here. So we can take the all these links and put them in their own stack. And the fill and fit situation in the navigation is a bit different, because since we want the basically this logo to be on the left and then all this content, the links, to be on the right, there's a couple ways we can do this. So the first one is if we just set both these parent containers, or put this in the logo in a container as well, both these parent containers to fill, then we can just set the alignment on the first one to left and then the second one to the right, or to end. And this is basically just like pushing this content to the left and this to the right, because it's filling up the available space. The other way to do this, if you want to set the width to fill here, or to fit, now they're just hugging the content, and we can set this parent container max width to space between. And now this is kind of hugging each of the edges. There's no wrong way to do it. It might depend a bit about your responsive decisions and how much content you have in there, but we can use space between for now. And on this max width container, I can actually add the inside padding to 32 pixels to give it that spacing. Inside of this stack here for the links, we can increase this to, I think, 24. And just rename these. And I can go ahead and change this fill to white and remove the background. And from here, looking at this navigation, really the only other thing is just this pre-order button. We can just go into this button component and add a new instance. This could, or a new variant. It could be tertiary, it could be navigation, whatever you want to name it. But let's just style it to be the same here. So this is 32 and 16 on the outsides. And the text size is that 16 medium. Background is black. And we can make the fill here. We can kind of invert it. We can add a border. Okay, so now we can copy this pre-order button from here and paste it inside of here, and then change the variant to navigation. So now we want to take this navigation and we want to put it on top of the image. We want to make sure that the navigation actually stays at the top throughout the scroll of the whole page. So just to even demo that right now, because we have our navigation taking up, or sorry, the hero taking up 100% of the viewport, we want to actually add another just placeholder content, and I'll do another 100 viewport so we have something to scroll to. And while I do this, you'll notice that this is actually getting cut off. Like, there's a lot of content here. The reason why this is because our desktop container, the height by default is set to 1,000 pixels, but on the top level, you always want it to be fit content. So the height of the browser is actually, or the height of the content in the browser matches the content and isn't a fixed size. So now if I preview this, I can scroll. So let's demo basically the two ways you can do this to put this navigation bar on top of the image. So first is absolute. And you'll notice that when I do this, it takes it out of the order of the layout. So it's going on top of the image because basically this is, the hero is the first item inside of desktop that actually is in the order. This is just sitting on top of it, separate from it. So if I do absolute and I scroll, you'll notice that it stays at the top of that section, or the top of the desktop. It's anchored to that 0 point. If I do fixed, same position, same controls, but it's actually going to stay on the top of the browser throughout the entire scroll, regardless of how far down you go. So that's what we wanted to do, and we also wanted to add a Y position of 24 to give that extra spacing. And then now we can take this navigation, and because it's going to be used across different pages, let's make this a component and go back to the home screen and just make sure that this width actually is set to 100% and doesn't get stuck at a fixed value. And the height, we can set it to fit because that height is being set inside the component. So now our navigation is looking good. And I'm just going to delete this placeholder content underneath. And if we preview this, we're not going to be able to scroll, but we can see that it is responding the way we want to until we get to the responsive states. So everything's pretty fluid at this point, but the main thing that should still be functioning without setting up breakpoints is this text here. You'll notice that it's getting cut off. The issue with this is that the width here is actually set to fixed. Or if it's set to fit, it's the same issue where it's basically going to always be this wide. So as you saw, as the text was shrinking, or the screen was shrinking, the text didn't care. If we set the width to fill, it is now the text container is going to take up the available space that it has, and the text inside is going to wrap if there's not enough space, like so. For the buttons, we want to kind of do the same thing, where we can set an actual wrap property, where if there's not enough space for both of these to fit within this container, they're just going to break to the next line. And this gap here, I'm going to set this to 8 instead of 10. So now when I bring this in, without even adding any breakpoints, this is pretty responsive. It's very fluid. And while I'm here, I'm actually going to tighten up this gap in this text here, because in Figma, sometimes the spacing is different than what you end up building. And then on this thumbnail here, I'm actually going to just change this back to fit. And if we wanted to change the sizing here, we can be a bit more intentional with it. For the breakpoint, let's add a tablet and a phone. And just like the components, if I make changes on the tablet here, we're not going to see them on the desktop. Same thing on the phone. If we make changes on desktop and there's no override already set, we will see those changes on tablet and phone. So starting with the navigation here, I also noticed that the anchor point is not set to the top. So we're going to anchor that to the top. You'll see it fix that there. And start with tablet. And we can just go to the hero here, set the padding to 32 instead of 64. And I think the alignment here actually makes more sense putting that thumbnail on the bottom. So I'm going to do that on the desktop so it translates on both. And we could even set this size down a bit. So we can set this to fix, lock the aspect ratio, and then cut that to, say, maybe 120. And on the phone, if we go to the hero section here, we can change this to 24. And the max width direction, we can go to up and down. And we can center it. And let's just center all the text, center the buttons. And then on the hero, we can set the alignment to the end. And we can shrink down this this play button. So we can, again, set that to fixed, lock the ratio, and then change this to, say, 120. And this text here, I actually want to shrink this down a bit. So what I can do is actually edit the heading style and add a breakpoint where this changes based off of the screen size. So for large, these are basically going to map the breakpoints here. It's at 48, which is, I believe, the default. And then it's just automatically setting these different sizes, but I'm just going to manually put these in, say, 36 on tablet. And then beneath this, we're going to do, I think, 24. And then we can do the same thing on this text. Let's open up this property. And on tablet, we can drop that down to 20. Here, we can do 16. And we have our navigation. So we have a couple issues here. One is the width here is, or the padding is not changing for tablet and phone. So I actually want to make a new variant for each of these responsive states. And we'll set the widths here to preview them, but really they're going to be filling the width anyways. So this is really just to see what it looks like. So on tablet, I just want to reduce that outside padding to 32. And then on the phone to 24. And for now, we could make a hamburger menu, but I'm just going to hide the nav items. I'll set this to 24, and we could even set the height here to something smaller, like 56. So now on the breakpoints, I can click on the component and change it to tablet, change it to phone. And now this is looking a bit better. So let's drag this out. Okay. And I like to test this at like 390 by 812 to see what it actually looked like. And then on the phone, I'd probably want to change this image just to have a bit more space on the bottom and move this car up. And you would just replace this image here, and it would just be for the mobile breakpoint. All right, so that wraps up fundamentals, but still plenty to learn with Framer. So if you're interested, definitely check out the rest of our videos on Framer. And if you're really keen, we have a Framer masterclass with over 27 hours of content and get into from beginning all the way to super advanced stuff. So definitely a lot to explore. Hope to see you all around.